of the Planning and Zoning Commission. All join in with George Handler in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge. We're not singing the national anthem. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, we have one item on consent, and I believe we're going to pull that item for some public comment. But before we do that, I believe we need to be sworn in for two quasi-judicial items. Anybody that's going to speak tonight needs to be sworn in. Okay, let me read this into the record. Stan Augustine at Vero Beach requests for preliminary plat approval of 57-lot conventional single-family subdivision to be known as San Augustine at Vero Beach. Royal Professional Builders, Inc., owner, Schilke Biddle and Stoddard, LLC, agent, located on the south side of 33rd Street, west of 66th Avenue, zoning classification RS3, single-family residential up to 3 units per acre. Land use designation L1, low-density residential up to 3 units per acre. The density in this project is 1.92 units per acre, and it is quasi-judicial. Staff, Brian.
Thank you, Chairman Bruce. Excuse me. My name is Brian Freeman. I'm Indian River County Senior Planner, and I'm just going to do a brief presentation on this proposed preliminary plat application. The subject site is located on the south side of 33rd Street and is between 66th Avenue and 74th Avenue. And this is actually a site that you all considered just about a month and a half ago for RS3 rezoning request. And that rezoning request was subsequently approved by the Board of County Commissioners last month. The site is adjacent to the Trillium West subdivision on the what would be to the east of the site, and then further to the east of that is Trillium, and then to the west of the site is an existing agricultural research use, and then north to the site across 33rd Street are some large single-family parcels and also some agricultural parcels, and then south of the site is an existing multifamily use. This is an aerial view of the site. As you can see, it's essentially former agricultural land, and it's actually 5 different parcels that have been assembled together by the applicant. And this is the basic layout of the subdivision, which is on the south side of 33rd Street. It's a conventional RS3 subdivision, and it has a gated entrance from 33rd Street. 33rd Street is currently a dirt road, and because of that, the applicant is required to improve 33rd Street from the existing edge of pavement at 66th Avenue to the project entrance. And then for the remainder of the project's 33rd Street frontage, they will have to escrow their fair share of the paving costs for the future improvement of that remainder of the project's frontage. This preliminary plat complies with the new landscape ordinance, which was adopted by the Board of County Commissioners back in March of this year, and among those requirements there are littoral zones incorporated into the project's stormwater tract. The project is also adjacent to the urban service area boundary, which is 33rd Street in this area, and therefore there is a 50-foot wide Type B buffer with a 6-foot opaque feature provided along the project's 33rd Street frontage. In addition to that buffer, there are also 25-foot wide Type B buffers along the project's east and west boundaries, and that's based on the buffer requirements for single-family subdivisions in single-family zoning areas or adjacent to single-family zoning areas.
Can I ask Brian real quick on the west side? There's not a 50-foot requirement because it's next to ag and active ag. It's only if ag went the other way that we had the 50 feet. That I remember we had a. If you're an active, if you go down zone, you have to put a 50-foot in on yourself. We don't have to put 50 feet on active ag like that.
Right. Back in 2005, there was a change to the agricultural buffer requirements as part of a whole series of changes that were proposed by the Growth Awareness Committee.
Right.
And among those changes, what was done away with was the old active agricultural buffer, which would have been a 25-foot wide Type B buffer with a 6-foot opaque feature for any residential subdivision that was adjacent to agricultural land, inside or outside of the urban service area.
I mean, we've had a blurred distinction between active and not inside of 95, I think, but there was the 50 feet, I thought, and that's what, we've done away with that now.
Right, that's been done away with and replaced by a buffer that's always required for projects that are adjacent to the urban service area boundary, because that's seen as being a more permanent line. A lot of times we were having buffers going in for adjacent agricultural properties only to see that property subsequently be developed as another residential development.
Just one other point. Don't I remember something about articulating these lakes, this stormwater retention?
Well, I think with this project, it was actually originally submitted about 18 months ago, and so I think staff, tried to work with the applicant in designing the site to meet the requirements of the new code. There is a requirement for ponds over a certain size that they are not to be rectangular in shape, and I guess with this project, since it had already been essentially engineered, that part we were able to just kind of work out getting the littoral zones, and that was deemed to be acceptable. And then the last point I just want to make as part of my presentation is the project does provide the required open space, which is a minimum of 7.5% of the site, and this is provided in 3 different places. There are 2 open space tracks up in the north, if I can get that mouse to work, up in the northeast corner of the site on each side of the entrance. And in addition, as part of the new landscape ordinance, the littoral zone areas and stormwater tracks can also be counted towards the 7.5% open space requirement.
Ask a question. Brian, can you back up a minute? Mr. Bruce just brought up about the fact that we are articulating the shape of the lakes now, the stormwater retention ponds, actually. And you said that the project had come in like 18 months ago. But on the next subject matter that we have coming up, the next project we have coming up, there's a statement that says that although the site plan application was submitted prior to the effective date of the new landscape ordinance, the site plan was not approved by June 29th. Consequently, the application is subject to the new ordinance requirements. So why would this project not be subject to the new ordinance requirements when the next project is subject to the new ordinance requirements?
Well, I didn't say the project wasn't subject to the new ordinance. I think it was just the staff was trying to look at a way to design the project so it met the spirit of the new ordinance with the littoral zones around the stormwater track, so it had a more natural edge. The stormwater track does have a rectangular shape.
Your mic.
I would say overall, yes.
It looks pretty rectangular to me. Yeah, I think our point is that it meets the littoral zone requirements, it meets all the quantities of the landscape materials, the different buffer types, and as staff indicated, this is a pretty significant change, and it just involves just the actual configuration of the pond. So I think staff thought that it could go as it was designed and still meet the intent of the code.
I don't mind letting that slide tonight, to be quite honest, because this project has spent 2 years in the process of, getting all their approval processes, and I know they've gone through some different scenarios and all. But in the future, I think I think maybe we could take a look at this a little bit closer before it gets to this point. Even though the application was submitted prior to the ordinance effective date, it seems like maybe we're setting precedent on the next project that just because the applicant put the application in prior to the ordinance change, that maybe we need to take a little closer look on future projects coming in and making them adhere to the new ordinance. Just a point. Thank you.
You had your recommendation page.
Oh, yes. Yep. Based on staff's analysis, staff recommends that the Planning and Zoning Commission grant preliminary plat approval for the St. Augustine at Vero subdivision with the conditions listed in the staff report.
Thank you, Brian. Anybody have any questions up here, Stan?
No, the only thing that, since we have pulled this, I mean, it appears to me under the current rules it does qualify, but there is the agricultural area next to this is fairly sensitive. I mean, it's been well documented, well argued about, and it's a research area, and I'm not sure if the buffer that's on the west side is sufficient.
I'll make a suggestion. I had asked actually for a graphic depicting the U.S. Urban Service boundary around this, if you have that.
Well, it's not labeled on this aerial, but it's actually the street that cuts across east-west on this aerial here. That's 33rd
Right.
Street.
The intent, as I remember it, of that change was in areas not where the urban service boundary was on a street, but on a just land. Has staff looked at maybe lessening that front boundary to 25 feet and putting that 25 feet on the western boundary?
Staff hasn't looked at that particular redesign to the project. Staff supplied the buffer as it's written in the code is along the boundary. And
I understand, but you see where I'm heading.
right. In most cases, actually does end up being applied along roadway frontages. Another example would be the Indigo multifamily site that
Right.
was done 2 months ago.
Do you have any comments on that, Bob?
Actually, we don't have the flexibility to do that. The way it's written is that that buffer needs to be put in whenever the site is adjacent to the urban service area boundary, and adjacent means if it's separated by a road. We wrote
Yeah,
that.
I understand that it was written that way. I don't know that we really intended it that way.
Would that apply since we have changed this 50 feet, I mean, do we have that flexibility even on the west side? I mean, reality being what it is, rules.
Right, you can ask the attorney. I don't think you have that flexibility.
Are you awake, George?
I am now. So your question is, do we have the flexibility to require a 50-foot buffer on the?
Yeah, I mean, is there a way do we have the flexibility really to modify the buffer system as presented or not? The concern to me is that the 25 feet, even though it is a type B buffer, may not be adequate considering residentials. I mean, everything about the subdivision is, I mean, it's 12, it's the bigger lots, it's not small. I mean, it no question it meets what I consider our criteria, but the concern is for me is that one piece of property, and every time we've been around it, whether it was Walker Avenue or not, I mean, they're concerned about it. And we tried to buffer this research area as best we could. And I don't know that we can, I don't know that we can do that now or not. A lot of times it's been voluntary. Tonight, I don't know whether we have do we have the right to change that?
One of the criteria, though, is compatibility, and this is not vague. This is pretty straightforward.
I don't think compatibility is even an issue in this. That's the point. With the rules, I don't think we have that right.
George, can I make a
Yeah, I'm
suggestion?
not sure of that, but go
May I
ahead.
make a suggestion? And where's Mr. Schulke? Joe, could you come up just a minute?
Well, let me, George,
Well,
legally, where are we?
Sorry.
there's two problems. One, there's pretty strict standards as far as when a 25-foot and when a 50-foot buffer is required. And it seems pretty clear that you can only ask for a 25-foot buffer. There is sort of a catch-all phrase that I'm trying to debate with. It's under 913.07 plat approval, and it has language that speaks to the Planning and Zoning Commission may attach conditions to an application which relate to Indian River County land development regulations and the effect of the project will have on the community and are necessary to protect the health, safety, welfare of Indian River County residents. That's sort of a real broad provision. I think that gives you some leeway at looking at situations. But the problem is that you have a sort of a...
Don't make me tell Craig he might be right.
But my understanding is that the applicant was actually willing to put a provision in maybe on the plat that would sort of identify any type of nuisance activities that took place while farming activities occurred on the property next to it. Is that correct?
I think we're going to object to farming activities being classified as a nuisance activity, please.
Well, any activities that might be construed as
It's on now.
Is it on? Is this on? Okay. We had agreed that we
Hey,
would,
Joe, Name and address. and-
Joseph Schulke, Schulkeville and Stoddard, Vero Beach, Florida, the civil engineer for the project. And we had agreed with staff that we would put a notification on the plat, which basically notified any potential property, landowners or purchasers of any lots that there's potential agricultural uses that are going to be going on. And we haven't gotten into specific language, but like you said, I don't think you want to say nuisances. That's, but there are going to be agricultural uses going on, and we agreed to notify everybody on the plat, by plat.
I have a question, George. Oh, you want to finish?
Well, the only difference is, I mean, aviation-wise, there is a protection for the airports or plane noise. And on agriculture, we notify, or we even deed restrict or deed notify, but you don't have there's no reason to protect a speed sprayer driving by at night, and that has always been the concern for those people that are truly active in agriculture and not in the holding pattern for development, which is sometimes in question.
Instead of, you're right, we used to require a 50-foot buffer. And right now, we've got a 25-foot buffer in a tract. So that not to have to incur additional engineering costs, could we request an additional 25 feet but not make it in a separate tract? Still keep it part of the lot size, but make an additional 25 foot? So that, you wouldn't be losing 25 feet off your lots and have to re-engineer these parcels.
But we would, if it's an easement, we're losing buildable area on the lot. I mean, pools can go within, I think, 10 or 20 foot of the backyard. Is that right, Brian? Is it 10 foot?
It's a 10-foot setback for a swimming pool.
Right.
So we'd only be able to gain 10 feet then, instead of an additional 25.
Right.
Okay.
I think we're captured.
Yeah, Bob?
The difference in a type A versus type B is density of planting?
Right. And actually, under the new code, there's actually, there's no, it used to be that at 30 feet, there was an A planting standard and a B planting standard. Now, a type A buffer is at least 40 feet in width. So the plantings that have been, set up for that 40-foot buffer are based on a 40-foot width.
Which is 15 more than we have currently. Okay.
Joe, did you have anything else?
Oh, no, I'm just answering Donna's question.
Bob.
I imagine I'll have an opportunity after your
You will.
questions to come up and make a presentation. But
Okay, Bob, you're up. Name and address and so forth.
My name is Robert Adair. I'm the Executive Director for the Florida Research Center. That's the property west to the subject property, St. Augustine of Vero Beach. My presentation is to bring you up close and front with the history of our involvement with development around the research station. Research station's been there since 1986. We acquired 35 acres of property. At that time, the urban service area boundary was not in place. It's a gift that came our way without our input. 5 acres of our property is on the north side of the property. And in the past, we've been before the County Commission in Planning and Zoning to articulate some of our concerns with urbanization next to agricultural operations. And what we did is we went back and looked at some of the issues that were pervasive in California, which is a rapidly growing state. And what you see before you, as ours is now, what you see before you is some content of a study that was done by the University of California identifying some of the issues that urban dwellers would have versus the farmers. And I wanted to point out the highlighted areas in red that I'm going to basically discuss with you, and that is the spray drift issue, noise has been brought before you earlier, and also odor. The noise can be generated largely by 3 sources. We have irrigation pumps that we run routinely According to St. Johns River Water Management District regulations, frequently this will be occurring at night. We have spraying operations occurring that's typically early morning, late evening, and into the night, and then general tractor activities of mowing and herbiciding and those types of operations. We've been, as a sustainable agricultural initiative, which is our mission, is to look and explore at new ways to sustain agriculture. We looked at applying composted material. There's a lot of studies that have shown that this is beneficial from a pest reduction standpoint. And then lastly, the issue of spray drift itself. One thing I want to make clear is that working in the area of sustainable agriculture, our sprays are largely non-toxic. We're looking for alternatives to traditional or conventional pesticides use, but nonetheless, the perception by the public is that sprays are dangerous or perhaps poisonous. These are not, but the perception's real. I'd like to address the sound issue, which I think is probably the most important issue with what we're looking at here tonight. We had OSHA come out and measure the decibel reading of our tractor with the PTO sprayer attached at operating RPM. They recorded a decibel reading of almost 100 decibels. That was 40 feet away from the sprayer. That would be somewhere between a discotheque and a jackhammer. The current buffer that is being proposed in this plan is a 25-foot setback, and I believe an additional 25-foot to the perimeter of the house itself. The Type B buffer is virtually transparent to both spray and sound. These are very young trees. They are bigger than a sapling, but rarely very small calipers. Remember that our sprays are going through the tree itself, and the noise would not be in any way reduced by a Type A or a Type B buffer, nor do we think of an additional 50-foot setback. We agree with that. The reason we agree with that is we believe in order to ameliorate the noise with these sprayers that we would need a 6-foot earthen burn or a 6-foot opaque structure. This same presentation was presented to the County Commission and resulted in the fact that there's these 6-foot opaque buffers. For example, in Walker Woods, at the northern extent of their boundary between us and the Florida Research Center, is a 6-foot earthen berm with a Type B buffer. Their garages that are right here, not these buildings, their garages from the property line are set back 70 feet. On Walker Avenue Club, the first building that came in, which is adjacent to our property, this would be our southeast corner right here, a 6-foot earthen berm was required with a Type A buffer. Since these two developments have been in place, we have had no problems with noise or odor or spray drift. We have had problems with trespass and minor vandalism, but none of the other issues. What's being...
Bob, can I stop you a second? Where is the subject property on this?
I'm sorry. This would be the western boundary and this red line here.
Okay.
And this is the proposed 50-foot Type A buffer with a 3-foot berm and a 3-foot hedge.
Okay.
And this would be the eastern extent here, and this would be the southern extent here. So I guess part of the point I'm saying is this works. And notice that our rows here, our citrus tree rows, are north and south orientation, which means the sprayer is turning at this end, whereas when the sprayer goes down this row, it'll be
Full blast.
blasting 12 sided houses. I was curious when you were talking about the landscape ordinance and the I guess, polygon shape for your retention areas. It was stated that that was done prior to the ordinance date. That's interesting because in 1995, the following paragraph was deleted from your LDRs, which did require a Type B buffer with a 6-foot opaque feature, which was our understanding when the applicant submitted their request for rezoning a month ago or whenever that occurred. That's why we didn't say anything. We found out when I saw the proposed site that it was 25 feet, and I didn't know, so I apologize for that. But I'm concerned that this very well may have been in effect when the original plans were done. I don't know that. But the point I'm trying to make here, there was a lot of wisdom in this, and it was yanked from the LDRs, wasn't aware of it. We worked hard to get it in there, not just for us, but for other agricultural operations. This is the current one for the northern boundary. I find it a little, I was told that the road itself would be the buffer. This came into place with an additional 50-foot buffer. This has a type B buffer with a 6-foot opaque feature. This is something that we feel that we really need on the western boundary for us to continue, not just an agricultural operation, agricultural research operation. And incidentally, I'd like to point out that the research that we do there is performed by a nonprofit agricultural foundation, 501c3, that has been in existence since 1986 and does not cost the taxpayer any money. These are independent funds that are put into the citrus community at a state, county, and regional area. In doing that work, one of the things that we look at are to develop technological developments and farming practices that help farmers exist with their urban neighbors. And by that I mean we've looked at extensively the use of biological control, integrated pest management, biopesticides, and we've found in instances that applications of fertilizers are suppressing diseases. One of the things that we're really concerned about right now in terms of spraying is the only viable way to control citrus canker is with spray applications of copper. Those applications are as frequent as every 2 weeks. This is according to the University of Florida. This is based on international research and state research by the University of Florida. To reiterate, we feel in this particular situation that as neighbors and as a business and a research foundation, that this buffer that's being proposed is not compatible with our research activities. It's not going to work. There's going to be problems with or without a nuisance waiver or whatever. Those people will not realize what the sprayer is going to sound like until they move in. Just to reiterate again, these northern extent of, the southern end of our property, these would be the south end of the rows. This is where the tractor makes its turn. So there's a momentary time when that tractor is spraying these ends. With this property we're talking about, it's going to be going parallel to the property owners. There's other issues that you may want to hear about later on tonight with the roads, but I would like to hold those back until a later time. And if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Anybody have any questions?
No, Bob or Brian, if we had the 25-foot with a type 6-foot opaque or 6-foot berm, how much space? You say we have to have a 40-foot wide buffer instead of 50. I mean, if we just went to this, it said type B buffer with a 6-foot berm. How wide an area are we talking about?
Well, with the previous language in the code that was removed in 2005, it would have been a 25-foot wide buffer that had a type B planting and had a 6-foot opaque feature. So the key difference between
Didn't have to have the berm, it could have the wall.
It could have been a wall, it could have been a berm, or a berm and a vegetation combination.
I mean, that's the way the old rule was written. I mean, and like it or not, I mean, Bob is asking for a wider buffer, which consistently he has done every time we have had these projects. And as you've seen on the south side, that we've granted in a lot of cases. I'm just wondering if 25 and a 6-foot opaque is better than what we got. At least you add the opaque feature to it. But I mean, that kind of fits the plans, although I think you could fit a little wider area in here with an adjustment in the plans and still have the same number of lots. You may lose one lot if you had to increase your retention up on the other end.
Yeah, if a
I don't
berm,
think it's as hard to do as, but we'd have to defer to their engineers.
yeah, if a berm were to be constructed in a 25-foot wide strip, you'd be looking at a berm that had a maximum height of 3 feet, because there would
Right,
be
because of the
3-to-1
slope. Yeah,
slopes
that's-
and then a 4-foot plateau across the top.
I have another question for Bob. This Bob. Yeah. Is there any way we can trade this urban service boundary off? I mean,
No, we can't trade it.
okay.
It's specific that we have to have
I
that.
understand that, but I for one, didn't feel that the urban service area or boundary on a road was where we needed a buffer. And so I'm just looking at, is there any way that we can amend this LDR and have it retroactive, or, I'm looking at trading stamps here.
The reality is, I think if you're going in that dimension, the lot, they're not picking up enough space. I don't know that they could make up the difference of the extra 25 feet. It's a good thought, but it's not there. I'm just wondering if you have 25 foot within a 6-foot opaque feature, there's an additional expense, but at least you get the opaque, you get something else in there, and it fits with what they've got outlined. But that's kind of my thought right now. It's not the best of all worlds, but it works the simplest.
Any other comments up here?
I'll chime in later on.
Joe, do you have any other issues?
Probably.
Gentleman in the back row had his hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry. Just 1 second.
No, I don't have any other issues. I just want to reiterate that we follow the code, we meet the code requirements, 25-foot type B buffer, and we think it should be approved in that fashion. As far as a 6-foot berm, if you will.
Opaque feature, I think.
Yeah, or opaque feature, but when they talk about a berm, it would take approximately 49 feet. If you assume.
I understand that
you know,
now. I wasn't
it's
thinking
just-
about
it's
the
just-
slope. You're right, Joe.
The slopes, because you're probably going up 9 foot to get up 6 foot above our backyards, and you got a 4-foot flat area, it's about almost 50 feet in width, it just doesn't work.
Observation towers, they could watch it grow.
Exactly. I believe that the Growth Awareness Committee put these things into effect, and I think their thinking was, and I was on that Growth Awareness Committee, was that the urban service line is just that. It's a line where there's going to be ag in the foreseeable future. We're going to have agricultural, but Mr. Adair's property next door, it could very well be residential development 2 years from now. I mean, you never know. If the price is right, we don't know. And we have projects like this all over the place, and I say we, I mean the county, where you're developing next to agricultural properties. And it's the same exact situation. Mr. Adair put on a good presentation tonight about what happens, and I think we all know that to one extent or another. But it's not different on any other sites where we're next to a grove, next to a residential development. And that 25-foot type B buffer has been acceptable for those projects, and I expect it should be acceptable for this project too.
Somebody back there in the back. Come up. You need to state, did you swear yourself in?
Yes, sir, I did.
Okay, and you also need to state your name and address for the record.
Yes, sir, my name is Russell Payne. I'm the manager of Cherry Lane Cattle LLC at 6820 33rd Street, and neighbor of Bob Adair and Royal Professional, and been at this location for some time now. There's been a number of things that have transpired along the way. I mean, when this whole project started originally with Sid Benak's portion of Trillium A up there at the front corner, how they said that they were going to put in a really nice buffer, and there was going to be a really a dense buffer to protect the agricultural applications that go on from Peterson Groves and Rivers Anderson stuff, and
On the north side.
that there was going to be a dense buffer there to protect those homes from the ongoing agricultural endeavors that happen in this area. And that dense buffer turned out to be a wooden fence with a few bushes planted along the way about every 60 feet, poorly inadequate. It just didn't cut it. There are a number of issues that come into effect that I concur with Mr. Adair on. Again, I'm not anti-growth. We're not going to be able to deny the growth of our community. That's inevitable. It's going to happen. But somehow or another, we've got to be able to coexist. And just in our Cherry Lane cattle observation, what we've got going on over there, we have a 20-acre site directly across the street from where this is going to be happening. And we've put in our own mulching buffer to try and insulate ourselves from what's going on over there, because we, like Bob, he uses material for what he does, and we compost manure with mulch to create good pasture land for grazing cattle. And there are spray applications that go on. We recently had a burn permit where we were going to burn some material that had been cleared off, and we got shut down because of the smoke, because of the people complaining in that area, wherein they moved into an agricultural area where this was an acceptable practice, and we ran into difficulties there. So we had to stop, shut down, retool, and just basically we haven't continued with that process from that point going forward. You do run into spray applications that occur in the morning time, in the pre-dawn, before the wind picks up. And you're running spray machines that sing. I mean, they make a lot of noise. The people that buy these homes are going to complain. It's guaranteed. And then there's going to be the noise ordinance, and people are going to complain about this agricultural application that's been going on since long before they ever even dreamed of putting a house there. And this is what goes on. This is what we do. This is our application. You have operations that happen at nighttime, okay? Whereas you've got people that are going to complain about things that happen after 8 p.m. at night, when in many endeavors, in a citrus application or in any horticultural application, this kind of stuff has to happen at night to minimize drift, to maximize foliar application of what it is that you're trying to apply. And we run into these things. Odor, there's a prime one. We will mix chicken manure with mulch to create a beautiful, fantastic material that will grow terrific grass for pasturing and grazing our animals. People don't want to smell it. And when the wind catches it and drifts it, I'm sure that when there's chicken manure dust blowing across your screen porch, you're not going to be happy about it as a homeowner. And they are going to complain about it. Traffic. We run semi-tractor trailers in and out of these positions. We've delivered material to Bob. We've delivered material to Kevin Adair over there at the organic nursery because of the beneficial qualities of mulched material to repel insects and pests and things that have started to destroy our citrus industry. This stuff goes on all the time. And we were here first. This is what we're trying to do. I'm all for the development. I think it's an improvement to the neighborhood. I don't want to fight that. I think we're fighting a losing battle because it's zoned for that. But there somehow has to be some cooperation so that Mr. Adair can conduct his business, because sure, maybe someday he will sell out and decide to develop his property. But what if he chooses not to? Doesn't he have just as much right to operate his agricultural endeavor for the next 20 years just as much as these other people have the right to develop their property for residential use. And so we find ourselves nip and tuck trying to be careful and, you know, doing the best we can to be good neighbors across the way. But at the same time, we get shut down, and we're going to be outnumbered because you're going to get a number of complaints from homeowners to one man trying to do an agricultural application for
Russell,
another man.
you're starting to repeat yourself. We're on your side, okay?
The news is you're on the 50-foot side.
Well, I'm on the opposite side of the road from them. And
You've got a big buffer.
Right.
but not necessarily a sufficient buffer, because they're requesting to purchase road front from us
Right.
that is not designated right away. It's not Murphy. It's our land. And I discussed it with Mark at length this morning about some of the things that we were interested in. Unfortunately, Eric Barquette is on vacation right now. He will be representing me in these interests of what we would like to see happen. But there are a lot of things to consider, you know, about drainage, about, you know, where's the pavement going to end, stop?
Right. Russell, I think we got your message very clearly.
Okay, so I'm here and willing to participate, but I think it needs to be fair to all of the parties concerned, both those who are pursuing, you know, developmental aspects as well as those who are wishing to preserve agricultural, because we have no intention of changing what we want to do agriculturally. In fact, I had a conversation with Rivers Anderson this morning about expanding even further agricultural operations in conjunction with him. So we've got yet another 20 acres
Okay.
that's going to be immediately impacted by this area. So please take heed of it, and we are all concerned, and it does affect everybody in the neighborhood. So that's
Thank you for your comments,
my
Russell.
2 cents worth. All right? Thank you.
Okay, I believe I see somebody else that wants to talk. Joe.
Joseph Paladin. I'm the chairman of the Growth Awareness Committee, so maybe I have an idea of my work. I know it's my fault. You know, seeing as how there's a problem with maybe Mr. Adair's machinery or the smell later on and stuff like that, if it wouldn't be an inconvenience to Bob, maybe he could let them run their buffer, maybe 25 feet on his property, and do a 50-foot buffer that way, because it's a temporary zoning he's in. So if it's ever rezoned, it would only make it that much more valuable to his land that it was already there, and he would have the 50-foot buffer he needed if it didn't cut down on his production. Just a thought. Is that possible?
I think anything's possible. I think there's a possibility that we could negotiate a 25-foot area at a mutually agreeable price. That would be one way to work this out. The second way to work it out would be to possibly table the item and re-explore the old buffer to correct it for other situations that you may find yourself into. For example, to the west of us, property is for sale right now, so that one would be difficult because of the location of my building. So we can't just keep selling land to create buffers. But on the east boundary, I will say that it's possible.
Thank you.
Okay. Yes.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Robert Knoll. I reside at 7102 33rd Street, Cherry Lane. My wife and I live there. It's immediately across from the Florida Research Center, so I'm immediately north of him. That's a dead-end dirt road. And the primary concern I have, and I just anecdotally, I can tell you everything that Bob says about the noise of the sprayers and stuff being done is correct. I mean, you can't sleep through it because he and I are relatively good neighbors. I mean, you know, it's no big problem for me, but you can't sleep through it. And he worked on a grove that I had for a while spraying it with chicken emulsion, or fish emulsion, I think, and chicken manure. And you haven't really smelled anything. Well, I'm sure, George, you have, but that's a real special treat. And I can't imagine, the people on the western boundary of St. Augustine, being thrilled with that. But my primary concern was, as Rusty said, he's not anti-growth, I am anti-growth. I realize that it's a fait accompli through the plan out there. The big concern I've always had, and ever since we went through the Benac and Ben Bailey III rezoning, is what's going to happen to that road. I mean, I bought out there, I like a dirt road, I'm happy to be out there. Other than the ag operations like Rusty and Bob's, because Bob has 5 acres on the north side of the road too. There are people that live out on that road. And traffic is tough. It gets tougher, as an example, with Rusty. Rusty's hauling mulch out there. I mean, it's a, and if anybody, and I don't know if Bob has any pictures of the road, but that road intersection is an absolute nightmare. And when you start bringing stuff in there, I guess the main concern that I wanted to do is to determine whether or not the commission could put as a prerequisite to conditional approval that road be, that intersection between 33rd Street, the west side of 33rd Street, and lateral A 66 be widened and paved. Because if not, you're going to be looking at, when you go off of lateral A down there, I mean, you're like this, and then if you start site work out there, I don't know, I'm sure there's going to be a ton of fill that has to be brought in, but that's going to be just a tough thing. I've always tried to get a read on.
I think I understood Bob to say they have to pave, and my understanding is any development has to pave from the nearest the road into at least to their project entrance, which would mean it'd have to meet the minimum standards at the intersection, which would require paving to a certain width, and pavement to their intersection, to the driveway, which would be the northeast corner of their property. They have to escrow the money to pave the rest, which would get out toward where you are.
Well, I understand, Commissioner, but the concern that I've had ever since, money was taken by the county from GHO or whomever bought the Benac property, and then the county negotiated with perhaps Fred Peterson and Rivers Anderson to buy that, is trying to figure out what's going to happen with that road.
Whether they really got paid.
Nothing's happened yet. But I mean, they're going to have to pave it before they sell the lots, obviously.
That is
My
correct.
concern is when they do the site work, there are not many of us that live out there, but that's going to become a worse nightmare than it is right now. Now, I don't know if there's anything that you guys can do about making that a requirement, that be paid before they start, before they start that work, because it's going to be a nightmare out there. And I don't know, I've talked to the engineers and the planners, and I get the idea that it's going to be paved. Well, I realize it's going to have to be paved before they sell anything, but what are we going to do during site work? That's my main concern.
Bob, can you answer that question, please?
Yeah, our condition is the road needs to be paved before a certificate of completion. I don't think we can put in a condition that it has to be paved before site work. I mean, that's pretty radical. And I think that any time during construction, there are going to be minor inconveniences, I think, for everyone. And the applicant's going to have to minimize it, and our public works and code enforcement people will make sure that they minimize any inconvenience.
Great.
Commissioners, I find it hard to believe with Mr. Keating that that's a radical concept. Obviously, he's never spent much time on that dirt road. But if that's the way the codes is written, I mean, that's a tough situation, because it's going to be a bad thing for everybody out there. Because the county, I think, tries to do something with that road. I think they grade it each week. But, when you get the rains like we've had since June the 1st, the monsoons, it's really, really tough. And when you start talking about hauling in dump trucks, bringing in 30 acres of fill into that area, I realize they'll get fill from the retention pond probably. But that's just going to be a terrible thing for everybody that lives out there. Thank you.
We understand that. Yes, Russell.
Yes, sir. I'd like to add just one more thing that concurs.
Make it real short.
I will, yes, sir. They had originally set aside funds to pave the road from lateral A going back for the original part of Trillium, and that has not happened as yet. And my concern is that if they're going to wait until, the certificate of completion, like, is that when the last lot sells?
No, Bob, can you explain that real quick?
A certificate of completion is when all of the horizontal infrastructure improvements are in and accepted. So that's the water and sewer lines, paved roads, drainage, buffers, those kind of improvements. And it's before any house will have been built.
Okay, good, because that was a concern, is that, they postponed this pavement, and it's eons before it gets paved, and in the meantime, your road's in really bad shape, and people have to travel up and down the road, and then it's in bad shape. So,
Okay.
if I can be of any assistance for anybody anywhere along the way with any of this, we're willing to help.
Okay, Joe, why don't you address Mr. Paladin's brilliant idea? See if you can come up with a compromise here.
Mr. Palin's idea to increase the buffer over to the adjacent property owner,
Correct.
I imagine that would probably cost quite a bit of money for that 25-foot. I don't know. Mr. Dare obviously didn't commit to doing it free of charge, and it would be, I think, something my client wouldn't want to consider doing, no, at this point. He may want to consider providing some buffer improvements if it didn't cost him anyone in land value. I don't know. He's here and I could ask him, but, to purchase land, no. To purchase rights, no. As I said before, we meet the code requirements. It happens. It's the same scenario all over Indian River County, and again, Mr. Dare put on a nice presentation, but perhaps it should have been put on a long time ago for all these projects, but we just want to be treated like everybody else, and it's, based on the code.
Okay. George, can you read that section again?
Health, welfare, public safety.
Yeah, I know. It's a tough issue because you do have language in the buffer requirements that specifically call for the type B buffer. But then when you look into the section 913.07, criteria for review of preliminary plat by county staff, the Planning and Zoning Commission, and the Board of County Commissioners, subsection 2 under approval states the following, and it's sort of awkward in how it's written, but I'll try to do it. Okay. The Planning and Zoning Commission, or in the case of an appeal, the Board of County Commissioners, may approve the application or continue the hearing to receive future input on the proposal. The approving body may attach conditions to the application which relate to Indian River County land development regulations and the effect the property will have on the community and are necessary to protect the health, safety, or welfare of Indian River County residents. It's sort of a catch-all that if maybe in unique situations, you can go beyond maybe the listed, that as long as it's supported by some type of substantial competent evidence and there's a strong rationale for health, safety, and welfare of requiring it. I understand there's a competing interest of having certainty, so it's two competing interests being brought forward.
So I'd like to respond to that just for a moment. You're right. It says it in the code. You made it pretty plain, pretty clear right there. However, I imagine there's got to be some kind of test, and I assume the Board of County Commissioners, when they changed these codes, and Planning and Zoning Commission, when they recommended approval of these codes, and the Growth Awareness Committee developed these codes, it was with that in mind. They felt a 25-foot type B buffer next to your adjacent properties in a single family meets that criteria, it meets that test. And I can't see how you could push it any further. It wouldn't be written in the rules as they are. Talking about the community, I don't see how that relates to the community, the public as a whole. What we're talking about here, Mr. Dare said himself that the spray is non-toxic. It is there's a perception, but the fact is it's safe. We have it all over the county, and I don't believe the county's going to be going around and enforcing this on all these other properties and making people upgrade and put these. It's just so inconsistent. We've approved plenty of plans in the last 6 months, the last 2 years with this scenario, and I can't see how you can pick that out of the code, and I think that applies right now today.
Joe, I'll answer that. The dilemma is now you got a test. You're right. Now you've got a neighbor who's pushed back. We've had a code in there. We've had anybody challenge it. You can challenge it, he challenges, but you got a neighbor now who is challenging that issue, and I don't think, and I'm not, and in his case, he's consistently challenged this from day one, and that's the only reason I brought it up ahead of time, because it's, as a research facility, I don't know what he's going to do, but he's been the strongest proponent of protecting that land and the distances there of anybody, any agricultural person in this area. And so, I mean, I tend to sympathize with that. I mean, I understand you in the criteria with which you described, and Lord knows I believe in private property rights more as much as anybody. But, and I don't know what to do about this. The only thing I can think of is to say, you know, I'll approve it tonight if you got to, you know, just put in a 25-foot buffer, 6-foot opaque feature, and if you can work something else out with him, fine with me. But you know, that's the old rule, not the new rule, and that's the only thing that fits. It's easy, and hopefully from my standpoint, it helps him. But he's the one guy in this county who has pushed back consistently on this agricultural protection. Mm-hmm. And he and Ralph Sexton, but Ralph's covered himself a different way.
Sure.
Joe, I'd like your suggestion as to, you had mentioned something about putting some verbiage on the deed, or how would you handle that to protect Mr. Adair?
Well, there's language that are added to plats all the time, warning if it's in a flood zone, or warning that you have to meet concurrency, you have to obtain concurrency before you get a building permit. So there can be similar language added to the plat that is, it's kind of like a warning / notification. And I don't know, Bob or Brian, maybe you guys can help me in exactly how you would like to see it done, but they would know better than I. But
Well, there's nothing short of a deed restriction that will indemnify Mr. Adair of some legal action. I mean, that's just the short and sweet of it. You can put all the warnings you want to in your sales brochure or the language, but it's not going to indemnify Mr. Adair from someone suing him.
Verbiage on the plat isn't going to show up on the deed, though, is it?
No.
But I liked your suggestion about the deed restrictions.
okay. I don't think I suggested that, but someone.
I heard it.
I think I said, I was talking about the plat, but.
I mentioned deed restriction. There's nothing short of a deed restriction that's going to indemnify Mr. Adair. The point here is that this is George and I, for the last 5 generations, have been here listening to this agricultural thing, and everybody does the parrot, oh yeah, we're going to save agriculture, but every time, literally, the landowners have won. Now we have someone, as George said, that has consistently and very well defended himself. Now, he's shown that the spray is going to physically touch the people in the houses. And to me, that's a health, safety, welfare issue. It's not compatible with the local area. And I'm not going to be able to support this unless there's some way that the builder can ensure me that he's going to be able to continue his practice of agriculture there. Otherwise, I'm going to vote no. It's time we stood up and gave the agriculture people the respect and the protection they need.
Thank you for your comments. Anyone else up here? Yes.
I don't know if this is appropriate to say this. Just for the record, in the spirit of compromise, I think that the idea of possibly selling an additional 25-acre strip, I think it's 1,300 feet long. I don't know what that.
25 feet. But
20, did I say, what I said?
you said acres.
25 feet, sorry, by, I believe, around 1320 or something like that. That would be a possibility. I think that would definitely take care of this situation. However, I'm not sure it's going to take care of the western boundary if and when that property takes place. But I think that if there was that may be a cost-effective way to settle this particular issue. If not, I really think that we, the Community Development Department, needs to relook at the buffer situation as it's written in the LDA.
I think we're all very aware of that. But Jerry, you wanted to talk?
I was not sworn.
Okay.
Do you swear or affirm that any testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
It is. I do. Jerry Swanson, PNS Properties, Ocean Drive, Vero Beach. Again, I get up here almost every Thursday night and I say the same thing, and I know you're darn tired of me saying it and hearing it, and I'm darn tired of saying it, but somehow in this county, we've got to stop the process of having a developer get this far in his process, meet all the codes, and you guys turn it down because you want to change the LDRs, or you want to do this, or you want to do that. I understand totally what you're saying, and I empathize with what you're saying, but there's got to be a better process. You can't, I heard earlier somebody say 18 months, this came before you 18 months ago.
No, I don't think it was quite that.
Was it?
The application was submitted in January of 2006.
Where was Mr. Adair 18 months ago? You know, I'm just saying, the cost of this project continues to go on and on and on, and we end up taking people's property rights at this venue, and that's wrong. Thank you.
I think we all agree with you, Jerry, but, you know, this county's got some real serious growing pains, and we're kind of teething all over the place.
And the property rights of Mr. Adair are just as important as the developers. We're just trying to make a balance.
Joe?
Thank you. Well, Mr. Swanson spoke. I had an opportunity to talk to my client, and so I'm going to address some things. Mr. Hamner, you had indicated that you were looking for a 6-foot opaque feature. As I told you before, physically we cannot fit a 6-foot earthen berm. However,
You put a wall, you
right. However, but let me throw this out to you and Mr. Adair also. I believe his point was that we needed. He was looking for. He was looking for a 6-foot opaque feature. He actually called me today and asked if we would do a 6-foot opaque feature, and I said I could not commit because I'm not my client. I don't make the decisions. However, a 6-foot opaque feature measured from his property, from his grade and not ours, obviously is a little easier to attain than 6 foot from our backyard. And if truly the 6-foot opaque feature is measured from where his tractors are spraying, where the nuisance is coming from, then that 6 foot should work to abate the noise.
It's not a nuisance.
I'm sorry.
To spray your property.
Yeah.
It's a right to spray
That's
your
right.
property.
You're absolutely right. So thank you for correcting me in that regard. However, anyway, we may be able to do a combination of a berm and a landscaping, potentially go up so our berm is measured maybe 2 foot above our finished floor from our house, which would make it probably about 5 foot from grade from his place, plus add landscaping, a continuous hedge, and it'll get us pretty close to where we want to be. Doing that, you would get, like I said, it was a 2 foot, you get 5 foot, I think, measured from his property, more or less. Plus you add the hedge of a couple feet, you're really 7 or 8 foot tall from his property line. And so that may be something that's reasonable and works within the what Mr. Hamner's looking for. And
the idea is just to try and deflect this upwards is what's
yeah, and I talked to Mr. Adair today, and he asked, can you do a 6 foot berm? And I believe he saw about measuring from his grade, not ours.
I promise you, he's not going to be happy with what I'm talking about either, so it's not going to matter. Both of you are going to be unhappy. But this thing's got to move on. I mean, we got to move ahead, and and Jerry Swanson is correct. We did accept this, and I can't believe I would have missed this as an agriculturalist. I would have missed this innuendo to the future. But the reality is that the reason it's up tonight is that there's no greater champion for carrying this thing forward within the urban service area, very close to it, than Bob has been. And so that's why it's so sensitive to me, because he's pushed this. But good news is for the rest of for the Bob Keating and his staff and the rest of us, we've only got one more boundary to go. So I figure whatever you just described, if Brian, do you understand what he just said on the two?
Brian, what I'm proposing is a berm 2 foot over our finished floor plus a hedge. Put a continuous hedge.
Yeah, I essentially understand that.
I was thinking 3 feet. And can you get a 3 feet? You can't get 3 feet? And then except it gets you closer to 3 and 3. We've done 6 feet with 3 foot and 3 foot. Yeah. You can do 3 feet.
How much room do you need?
You can
We
make.
don't have the plans in front of me, I don't know, we're probably 3 feet above grade as it is, so you're going 3 plus 3 plus 3. So
3
you're-
above grade now?
So you're 6 times 3 is 18 plus 9.
I mean, I
That
don't
that
like.
goes over 25 foot, right, right there. You're talking about 18 up and 9 down, and that's well, we don't have to have a flat area, I'm assuming, right?
You're taking 2 feet, and whatever you describe is fine. I'm not, I want something in there.
I'm just trying to make something that'll physically work within the parameters. I believe 2 foot above, the back of our property will give 5 foot above his property, plus a continuous hedge. And I think I can
gonna be
physically
halfway. It's
make that
only-
work.
Be halfway there.
I'm not sure with all the complaints on emails, if the term half-ass is acceptable. Bob Keating is going to bite me later, because, I mean, I don't like to micromanage stuff from up here, but I'll do it tonight.
Can you get 3 feet in a berm and get
No.
into that, using that 10-foot easement?
It'd be the 10-foot for the pool setback.
Oh,
Oh, okay, yeah.
So
So
we
you
really
can do
have
that.
35 feet we can play with.
If you go in, if you.
if you go into that 10-foot area, we have 35 feet to work with.
We can get a 3-foot berm with a 2-foot hedge on top.
With a 3-foot hedge.
3 feet. So we're trying to get to 6 feet.
Okay.
Yeah, that would give you 6 feet. Can we say this can be 6 foot above his grade?
Yeah, but are we sure that a hedge is going to
Wouldn't that
work?
be,
I mean,
the berm's 6 foot above his grade?
I don't believe a hedge is
Close
going
through
to
trees now,
do
you're
it.
right.
I mean, I think we're talking,
You're trying to get opaque.
right. So if he's requiring 6 foot opaque, I think he should 6 foot
6 foot, and they
opaque.
let him figure out how to do it. That's what I was thinking, so.
Right.
I don't understand.
Because, I mean, my understanding is the property to the south meets what
It
Mr.
it
Adair
meets it
wants.
because they tailor it.
And so
Yeah.
there's a problem there why we got it changed. I mean, he fought for that, and now for a loophole in the whole thing, it's fallen down. So I think he has
Not
a
a
strong
loophole.
case, and,
It's not a loophole. We're creating a loophole right now. Yeah.
well, it was a mistake then.
Bob, you want to weigh in on this? Everybody else has.
Yeah, and let me just tell you why it was changed. And staff struggle with many projects. If you looked at Trillium initially had to put in an ag buffer because I think it was the Gephardt property.
That's
That is
right.
just west of here was agriculture. That's now Trillium West. And what happens is, and what we found time after time, it didn't make sense buffering ag that's in the urban service area. A development that's in the urban service area, buffering ag that's in the urban service area and is programmed, is anticipated to become urban itself. What happens is the development, like in this case, Royal Builders, would have to put up a 6-foot berm under the scenario we're looking at, and then Mr. Adair's property could convert to development, and he wouldn't have to put in any buffer. They lose yield, they have to incur the cost for a property that is only for a certain amount of time probably going to be ag. It makes much more sense to have the buffer at the urban service area and to protect that urban service area line and to encourage continued agricultural operation and buffer that agriculture that's outside the urban service area. So I think that, and we dealt with that Trillium-type situation on many occasions and had to define what's active agriculture, which was real difficult on that situation and difficult on others. So I think the change was thought out, it made sense, and it reflects the planning that's done. I mean, it's too bad when an urban service area boundary is developed, there is residual ag inside it. And in this case, a research area. But the reality is the change that was done did make sense.
Then how best do we protect Mr. Adair from complaints or having to respond to complaints?
Well, I think what you're hearing is it's just the opposite. First of all, I don't know of any complaints we've gotten for any project that's adjacent to ag right now. And I think if you heard Mr. Adair, he's having trespassing and vandalism and problems with the adjacent development. And so I don't know how long he'll be there. I mean,
I think
that's
Mr.
why.
Adair's made it pretty clear over the years that he's there. He's
Yeah,
there
I
for
think-
quite some time. He has no
Very
intention of
consistent.
moving. He has been very consistent. So why don't we just find some way to protect Mr. Adair from complaints? If people don't like what you're doing, then they knew about it going into this project, just like they would know going into an airport. And so that's,
You know, we don't feel Mr. Adair's going to be there for very long. He approached our client about 3 months ago and asked if he wanted to buy the property. I mean, it's as simple as that. Did not want to bring it up, but it's come down to that. I mean, come on.
okay, how about then some deed restrictions protecting, if they don't like it, Mr. Adair has the right to do his spraying and to make his noise as a normal agricultural process.
I have to respond to that last statement. I did contact Ken Treadwell, who handles legal matters for Royal Builders, to offer to sell the development rights off the east 10 acres to avoid this type of problem. I didn't know about the buffer at that time. They could buy the land conceivably. I checked with Bob Keating, he can confirm this, that they could conceivably increase the density and then have a 300-foot buffer. That I thought was good for me. I thought it might be good for them.
Interesting.
Thank you.
We have one person at the podium over here. Go ahead. Your name and address. Did you get sworn in?
No, I haven't been. I do. Actually,
Name and address.
my name is Brian Quant. I'm a neighbor of Mr. Adair over on 37th Street, roughly the 7,000 block. Just wanted to bring up a question. As far as I know, from what I know of Mr. Adair's operation, he runs a pretty tidy farm, and there's really nothing too much to object to, but I don't think there would be anything to prevent him or me in the circumstance like this to doing a more aggressive agricultural endeavor. Say we wanted to put up a chicken house or something like that. Now, if Bob doesn't sell his land if he doesn't sell it at all, or if he decides to change his venue or do something else that might be more unacceptable than it is now, I just have to ask, partly for my own benefit, where does this stand if all of a sudden the neighbors say, hey, it stinks out here?
I think that's the issue.
Right.
I
Well,
think we fully understand that.
I guess my question is, I'm hearing about 2-foot buffers and hedges and things like that, and,
You're right. It's probably not enough.
okay, well, that's all, that was my comment.
Russell, do you have something that you need that is?
You said that the last time, Russell.
But we need to cut this off.
I understand.
George?
I agree with what Brian said. If under the agricultural limitations, if we wanted to put in a chicken farm, we could, and the odor would be quite objectionable. I had some concerns that I was going to get with Mr. Schulke on, because I know that they were interested in purchasing road frontage from me in order for them to put in their development across there. And we have recently platted our property such that it is in 4 parcels, 2 of which are 200,000 square feet each. If I give up any road frontage whatsoever, I put myself into a position where I no longer have a buildable lot. And I had addressed a letter to...
I don't think so, but let's address this specific project only and not what's going on around it.
Okay, well, that road
Okay.
frontage was considered as part of something that they were requesting in order to put that in.
Right, but I think it's fairly clear that you're okay.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
May I
All
ask
right,
our attorney something?
Yes, go ahead.
George, do you have some kind of a solution to protect Mr. Adair from future complaints where he can say, hey, look, you knew going in?
I told you so.
Well, the problem is that we can't require, I think what you were sort of hinting towards earlier was the indemnification language, and you can't do that. You're limited under this provision. I've read the sort of catch-all provision. It's got to be something attached to a land development regulation. So we can require perhaps a notice to be put on the final plat that says, there's agriculture operations continuing next to you, that these operations are consistent with how farms are run.
George, let me just ask you, can we require that the applicant put an easement along the west 40 or 50 feet of his project, granting Mr. Adair the right to put noise and spray drift there?
Excellent idea, Bob.
Or if the applicant will voluntarily agree to that? There'd actually be an easement on the plat that'll show up on the deeds, on the survey that is done.
Excellent
for each
idea,
pro-
Bob.
Kind of like a navigation easement.
I was going to say that, yeah. I was going to suggest that, too.
Do you want to call them, Brian?
Close the public hearings and take a vote, then we'll find out what happens.
Is this a public hearing? No, it's.
It's not. I just opened it up.
The applicant would not have a problem with an easement that, as long as it does not restrict his ability to build within that easement, pools,
Okay.
normal residential.
How didn't we think of this earlier?
George, you want to make a motion?
And that easement would be something we would want lifted once Mr. Adair's property is developed.
Right.
It would kind of automatically be lifted.
Yeah.
Okay.
George?
I'd move we accept the applicant's, or the staff's recommendation on this applicant's, whatever we call it now.
With the caveat.
With the addition of
Stinking noise.
notice on the final plat with a 50 or 40-foot easement that does not restrict building, but that notices and is on the deed that tells the new neighbors that they've got an agricultural operation and that they have the right to spraying, noise, et cetera, within that area, that clearly delineates the fact that the operation next door is protected.
Do I have a
As
second?
stated, similar to an aviation, I always say aviation.
Navigation.
Navigation.
I'll
easement.
second that.
Okay.
Y'all figure out how to fine tune that.
All in favor?
Could we have some more discussion?
Sure.
On the point, you said it was a radical idea to pave the road before the certificate of occupation. What's so radical about it?
I think it would be pretty radical to require them to pave the road before any infrastructure work, before land clearing.
So would there be, and you mentioned there'd be some protection or,
Who maintains that road? Once it, just like, this would be similar to when we have the dirt fields and whatnot, that intersection out there gets torn up. Who's going to maintain all that?
What will happen is, we'll work with engineering and make sure as part of the land development permit and part of the right-of-way permit for the road, that the applicant's responsible for maintaining it.
who's responsible for it right now?
The county does.
And it's pretty bad shape, right? Have you been down there? I mean, I go
Yes,
down there occasionally.
I was down there a few weeks ago. Yeah, unpaved roads, particularly.
Well, this one is particularly bad.
Well, with the rain that we had been getting up to a few days ago.
Well, I mean, talking about.
Is this, this is not something we need in the motion. It'll be done anyway, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Code enforcement byproduct.
But I would like to see it in, some more attention than it's currently getting.
The applicant had a chance to make a proposal, but I never had a chance to say how
Go ahead.
it sounded. I'm concerned when you talk about the easement, are you talking about the entire width back to include that first row of
Yes.
houses, or
Yes.
the second row? And how do you handle odor at that point, just out of curiosity?
I think it's going to be pretty much equivalent to a berm across there. They're essentially saying that you're getting your 50 feet essentially.
So the houses end up being the buffer.
Mm-hmm. Is there any more discussion up here?
I think it's better than the 6-foot opaque feature, frankly. It's clear.
Yeah. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anybody
That's
opposed?
a
I am still opposed. I think it still
One.
falls under the health
Anybody
welfare.
else?
Oppose.
2 opposed. Everybody else in favor?
Statements have to be made.
Okay.
I like it. Nobody's happy. Good.
Craig, you need to state your reasoning.
Still the same reasoning under the health welfare of the public. The spray is going to physically contact the houses and the people, and I don't think it's a safety issue, public safety issue for me.
Okay. Richard?
I'm for protecting agriculture, and I think that particularly since it's a research, it's vital. I think it fits under the loophole of the law that allows a change in policy there.
Right. Okay, I did forget the minutes at the front end of the meeting, so. do I
Move to
have-
adopt the minutes as presented.
Second.
Everybody in favor of that? Yes? Okay. Let's take a break right now. This is a good time, and then we'll get with the other project. Get rolling here.
Let me give that Janice.
Okay.
Yeah, I was trying to be good, not clutter up.
Yes. Also quasi-judicial, anybody that's speaking on this item does need to be sworn in if you haven't already been. East Coast Animal Medical Center, request for administrative permit use approval for a veterinary clinic and accessory kennel to be known as East Coast Animal Medical Center. Dr. Valerie Beal, owner. Knight McGuire Associates, agent, located at 6580 69th Street, zoning classification A1, Ag 1, up to 1 unit per 5 acres, land use designation Ag 1, agriculture up to 1 unit per 5 acres. And Steve, you're up.
Steve, before you start, I have to divulge that since this is quasi-judicial, that I was out at the site today and I did run into Dr. Beal and did have a few questions of her, and I have given to everybody a brochure that I picked up that shows the current operation on the property. So I've divulged it.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman Bruce. Stephen Dierda, Senior Planner, Community Development. The proposed use is for a veterinary clinic with an accessory kennel within agricultural zoning. This is administrative permit use. It's regulated in scale and duration or nature to avoid adverse impacts on the surrounding properties. And it has to meet specific LDR criteria, and it requires approval by you, the Planning and Zoning Commission. The location map shows the site on the northeast corner of the intersection of 69th Street and 66th Avenue. The aerial provides a view of the location and the surrounding properties. You can see to the west, south, and north, it's predominantly groves. However, to the east, there are 5-acre home sites. The site plan shows the proposed clinic building. It's where the actual veterinarian office will be. And then the proposed accessory kennel is next to that, and then the standardized parking area. The landscape plan provides for roadway buffers along 66th Avenue on the area abutting the site area of development. A roadway buffer 15 foot along 69th Street that extends the entire length of the property. There's also a 15-foot driveway buffer on the east side of the area development. The roadway buffer is next to the right-of-way, which has that as a condition in the approval has actually been fulfilled at this point, and I'd state that the county did purchase part of that right-of-way. Staff recommends that the Planning and Zoning Commission grant administrative permit use for the East Coast Animal Medical Center with the conditions listed in the staff report, with amendment to the dedication of the right-of-way being with compensation. Thank you.
You're welcome. Anybody up here have any questions?
Is there any spraying? No. Got to keep a little bit of humor here. I understand this very little, but would you, Bob, it says down here on the duration or nature, would you explain duration to me under permits that we got here? I don't remember coming across here. And the third, the Planning and Zoning Commission now considering granting approval of administrative permit use for as use that requires administrative permit is one that normally, and it goes, when carefully regulated in scale, duration, or nature. Are we
Yeah, that's Stan Bowling, Planning Director. That's standard language that's been in the code for years and in some of the items. And duration is the type of issue we tend to get into with hours of operation. For instance, the duration of an operation, mining operations, that sort of thing. That tends to be the type of duration we talk about.
Thank you.
Does anyone mind if I go ahead and open the public hearing? We have somebody that needs to leave.
Yeah, go ahead.
Come on up.
Get her on the
Wait a
record.
minute, do we get to vote?
No.
No, okay. I understand now that you're explaining it to me.
You need, right here, you need to state your name and address for the record. Did you, were you sworn in?
No, sir.
Do you swear affirm that any testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do. My name is Maria Mandina. My address is 6730 69th Street. I'm on the west side of her property, and I just wanted to let everybody know that I just support her, support this clinic, and I hope it goes through. I had 4 horses that died because I had to travel so far away to get them, taken care of. So this would be great to have a facility like this in Vero Beach.
Thank you.
Thank you for
So
your
you're going to
comments.
be in close proximity to the new kennel?
Yes, right across the street.
And it has no effect, you're, okay, good.
I think it would be great for everybody, not only in Vero Beach, Sebastian, so many other places, because I think we need a place like this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Do we have any other comments up here?
No.
Anybody else from the public wish to speak?
Good evening. I'm Scott McGuire with Knight McGuire and Associates, representing Valerie Beal tonight. I just have a few brief words. Not a dog and pony show.
Boy, I tell you, Scott.
Okay. Again, East Coast Animal Medical Center, primarily a veterinary clinic, accessory kennel, relatively small in scale. The building's 4,100 feet, 2,600 feet, designed to look like homes, Key West style, much different than you would think when you think of a hospital or a kennel. It won't look like that. If you look at the architecturals, you see it does have a Key West style with metal roof, these types of things. The overall site, 11.5 acres. It's a big site, big separations from adjacent properties. With the administrative permit use, that's the approval process we're going through tonight. With this project being outside the urban service area, in the ag zoning, it is administrative permit use in the ag zoning, so a little different than what we were just talking about, kind of the opposite here. This project's been in the staff's hand for a long time. We've redesigned, we've adjusted, we've moved, we've fit, and I think the design we've come up with is very compatible with everything surrounding it. We worked real hard to be sure we did not have any compatibility issues with sound and sight. Basically, the distance there is really going to help offset any potential for compatibility issues. Again, we're filling a need. We have real distance problems in servicing and doing any kind of surgery on large animals in this county. And there's been some problems because of that. This evening, if there are any specific questions related to how the clinic or the kennel will be operated, Dr. Beal is here to speak to that. Anything related to architecture, Chris Crawford is here as a record architect, and I've got all your answers for any engineering questions.
Thank you, Scott.
Thank you.
Scott, I have one question. You discussed the architecture. I did pick up some brochures out there today, and it has a picture of the building that she already has in operation. And do I assume from your statement that those buildings are going to be very similar to this, because this is the Key West?
They'll be similar, but that's a barn It doesn't have a lot of the things that we're going to be adding, front porches and things like that. That's a relatively rectangular building that,
But this
if we
has
did
the
the best we
metal
could with
roof.
that, they'll be much better than that.
Okay, all right. I just wanted the other commissioners to see what the architecture was of the building that she has there now, and it's really a lovely site.
Thank you.
Steve, I had two questions. This angle cut, is that for turning radius for?
Right away.
No,
Is
that's
that what
for
that's
the, at the intersection for the light poles, boxes.
Oh, okay. And then this 8-foot wide pedestrian path, is that there now, or is that proposed to be constructed?
That's proposed to be constructed.
As part of this project?
Yes.
It wasn't called out in any of the recommendations.
That's actually the client's proposal.
Say it
The
again.
client's suggesting to do that. We did not require it.
Okay. All right, that's all I have. Anybody else?
After you close the public hearing.
Oh, I'm sorry. Anybody else from the public who wishes to speak? Seeing none?
Oh.
One.
Boy, you almost.
Make it quick so we can.
Yep. I think I've already been sworn in. This is what I really came here for tonight.
You need to state your name and address again.
Okay, Brian Quant, 7195 37th Street. A small agriculturalist. I think it'll be a good thing for the area. Dr. Beal treats horses now. She's a mobile vet. I think it'd be nice to have a place that if we have other large animals other than horses, cows, sheep, pigs, goats, whatever. I know Val takes care of mine, but often it's difficult doing things at my farm because I don't have the facility to really take care of animals like she would at this. So as a proponent for small agriculture in Indian River County, I think it is a definite benefit.
Good. Thank you for your comments. Okay, I'm going to close the public hearing if I don't see anybody else sticking their hand up. Okay.
Okay, I'd like to make a statement on this. I'm as skeptical as the next person. So when I see a kennel come across, and we just had this not too long ago, I'm thinking, all right, accessory building, this is an excuse. This is a way to get around the system. We've got this little kennel going in. So I went out to the site, and I was surprised to see there is a building there. There is an operation, and I was very impressed with this. I mean, she, as a large animal vet, she's got it's just a really cool operation, and I really do feel that the kennel is going to be an accessory to this clinic, and this is not trying to pull one over on us, and I'm
Well, you're welcome to come west of town anytime you want to, darling.
well, you're welcome to come north of 510 too.
I have to get my visa stamped to go that far.
Anybody else?
I'd move to adopt as presented.
Second.
Okay. All in favor? Aye. Anybody opposed? Passes unanimously.
Nice facility, Doc.
Valerie, will you relax now?
Yeah, boy, she was a nutcase.
Take a Valiant.
No. Scott, have you got any Valium with you?
Okay, next item up is Commissioner Matters, and I believe Greg had one real quick one before
Look, she's crying.
Chris.
Tell you don't know how wound up. We may need another break.
On her tippy toes. Yeah, break time, she about went over.
You just beat the hell out of somebody else.
Thank you, Bob. When I asked to speak during Commissioners' Matters, it was something that's very closely associated with the first action that we took tonight, but I was thinking more about the change that we had in light industrial, heavy industrial. She is upset, isn't she?
She's happy.
Happy.
Yeah. Happy camper.
And my concern is I'm going to take some givens here, and that is that proper comprehensive land use planning was done by the county and by the state, and we've set these zones specifically associated with balance in the county and what you hope is going to happen in your county in the future. And while I assume that there was some consideration of it being a fluid document, I know that there's certainly a lot of criticism in the state of Florida, not in Indian River County so much, but in the state of Florida about the changes that are consistently occurring in the comprehensive land use plans and it degrading that comprehensive plan. And my question really goes to Bob, and that is, it seems to me that what happens many times is that commercial and industrial is out there set in an area based on how large an area is going to be developed in the future, where your urban service boundary is, the number of acres, et cetera, and the types of businesses that we are going to accept in the county. And so it seems to me that that is set, and then a development comes in, subdivision, and after the zoning is all done and people move in, and then someone comes along and wants to put something in, like the cement plant. This is what caused me to think about this and ask this question. And what I was wondering is if there could be some county-operated, computer-generated automatic within a certain distance of those zones that would say to the person that's going to get the permit to build a home, you need to understand that you are within 1/4 of a mile of a certain type of zoning, and explain in that automatic letter that's generated what could be in that zone. And the reason I would like to see something like that is that I thought it was interesting tonight in the issue with the development that it came, it all comes to us. 18 months are involved. Seems to me that the professionals who are consistently involved in this, i.e. engineers and owners, that they understand that something like this was going to happen. They know where that urban service line is. But what little contact there wasn't effective. So it comes down to us sitting here, and on the one hand, and I have consistently agreed with Jerry Swanson on this, although I started saying it when I came here. Somebody follows the rules, and they invest in those rules, in effect. I feel that they have the right to go ahead with their project, and I have voted consistently to that effect. While at the same time, I'm compassionate to people that have a concern about what's going on around them. So my question really is, I know that it's relatively easy to cause a letter to be generated when something like that occurs. It would be the backup data information source, which would be able to consistently give the information to that person who's going to come in, get a permit, say, I want to build a home here. And we say, here's what's around you, here's what may happen. To me, that stops people from coming in later on and saying, hey, I don't want that there. I've got my home right over here. I don't want to see that thing. It's going to be this tall. It's going to create dust. It's going to do this. It's going to do that. And then, as a commissioner, I would have a deaf ear. When they came in, I'd say, hey, you were notified what the conditions were in this county when you decided to buy that home there. And consequently, I'm not really listening to you.
Well, the developers and the homeowners are supposed to have the responsibility to due diligence before they buy anything, and that's always under the law. That's always been their responsibility. Due diligence before you buy anything is your responsibility. I understand what you're trying to do, but I don't know how in the world Bob would be able to do that.
Well, nor do I understand. That would create a liability, it seems to me, on the part of the county.
Yeah, I would be concerned about that.
Why? For notifying someone?
No,
You're
no,
saying
no.
zoning is?
If they screwed up on
You're
it.
saying what it is, and if it changes later, they're sure going to try and hold your feet to the fire. They may not do it, may not be successful in doing it, but they're sure going to try and hold your feet to the fire.
Yeah.
But there would be public announcements and then action by the commission and the P&Z if changes took place. So those people that were there would have the opportunity to bring their voice at that time for that end. I just feel that having what happened tonight, when you've got two good arguments. One is we're allowed to do it. The other is there's practicality associated here, and I agree with Craig. I don't care if that's a non-toxic material that's being sprayed. Those people have children out there, and that spray gets up above 5 miles per hour, and it comes over there, and your kids come in and say, hey, I got this stuff on me. I don't care whether it's toxic or not. You got a problem.
You're going to get a lawsuit.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I guess there's another point here too, and that is that these LDRs are kind of like living changing documents. And what ends up happening is we put them in with the best of intents, and then we try to implement them, and all of a sudden we go, oh, whoa, we didn't think about that. Case in point is the one with the urban service area. I didn't think about it being on a road. So my intention was that buffer be where land met land, and I didn't even think about it. So
What I'm really talking about is notification, and
I understand, but what I'm saying is the LDRs will change out from underneath it all the time. So
I concur with you from the standpoint, broadest notification possible, but the obligation of making that notification, I think then creates a liability. If somebody I didn't get the word.
yeah,
I don't want to be the vehicle for notification.
Did you want to address any of this? Hot potato?
Just say yes, Bob.
No. But, well, I think conceptually it's a good idea, but it's probably even more important, not just when a house is built, it would be when it's sold each time, because, and it would be pretty problematic. Actually, I cringe every time we have to send notification letters out, because it's like us telling people there's a problem. Even when it's not that there's a problem, it's that we're going to be putting this development that's compatible and well buffered.
Wave the flag.
Yeah, it's
flag.
waving a red flag. But like I said,
and then they still come to the meeting saying I didn't get a notification, because city clerk used to have to literally bring the notification from the newspaper, because people would come up and say, oh, I never saw it.
Yeah.
Had to have physical evidence.
well, like I said, I didn't think it was a good idea.
Okay, Chris, you're up.
Thank you. My name is Chris Moore, Assistant Public Works Director for Indian River County. The purpose of this presentation is to bring planning and zoning up to date on what occurred at the Board of County Commissioners meeting on July 17th with regard to US 1, and this will be an update on the US 1 capacity as well as the level of service for traffic. A little background, US 1, of course, is a state roadway, and in our county, concurrency applies to all of the county thoroughfare plan roads as well as the state roads. US 1 is a 4-lane roadway predominantly throughout the county, with the exception of a short, about a half-mile section of 6-laning that's been done right around the 4th Street or Indian River Boulevard intersection. The average daily traffic on US 1 currently ranges between 22,000 and 35,000 vehicles per day. And why US 1 has become critical recently is there are some links, some segments of US 1 between Vero and Sebastian, between State Road 60 and 510, that have become close to capacity recently. As far as the widening status of US 1, there are some segments in the South County that are programmed and funded for 6-laning. I mentioned the 6-laning half-mile around the intersection of 4th Street and Indian River Boulevard. That is going to be continued. That 6-laning will be continued south over the South Relief Canal down to Oslo Road. And that's a funded improvement in the DOT 5-year plan scheduled to begin construction in 2008. It's fully funded. They've got $18 million funded for that construction. South of Oslo Road, it's also programmed for 6-laning from Oslo Road south to past Highland Drive down to the St. Lucie County line. Although that six laning is not funded for construction. They've got about $10 million set aside for right-of-way acquisition over the next 5 years, but construction is not funded. We also have six laning programmed in the counties, in the MPO's long-range plan, in some North County segments. Between the North City of Vero Beach city limit, which is 33rd Street, and County Road 510, it's in our long-range plan to six-lane it. Also between, we skip over Sebastian, but between Roseland Road and the North County line, the Brevard County line, is also programmed for six-laning. But again, in the North County, we don't have any construction funding available for those North County six-laning projects. A real short review on level of service. Traffic level of services range from A to F. A is best, F is the lowest. Most communities adopt either LOSD or E for their peak hour conditions. Indian River County has adopted level of service D. You can look at level of service either qualitatively or quantitatively. Qualitatively, if you look at the two best, A or B, that usually means free-flowing, uninterrupted, pretty stable traffic conditions. C and D is when you start to get into delay, some delay at the traffic signals, and lowering of speeds. And then the two worst are E and F is when you get into major delays and stoppages, and F, of course, is when you can even experience long stoppages or occasional gridlock during the worst of the conditions. Quantitatively, those are qualitative. Quantitatively, you can also come up with an actual capacity in vehicles per hour for each of the level of service letters, A through F. Where those come from is initially they come from the DOT level of service handbook, which is a statewide average of different types of roads, 2-lane, 4-lane, 6-lane roads. And we often use these default capacities as a starting point for level of service D capacity, which is what we use in our concurrency tables. An alternative way to calculate capacity is to use software. And we've mentioned these software programs before, either ArtPlan or Synchro. All of these capacity methods, DOT handbook, ArtPlan, Synchro, all of these are currently allowed under the county's land development regulations. What is an arterial analysis? Well, you're basically looking at, instead of using the DOT handbook, you're really tailoring an analysis for a particular roadway. You use roadway-specific factors, signal timing, signal spacing, number of signals per mile, speed, any and every traffic characteristic you can almost think of, percentage of trucks. Engineers will put into these calculations using Synchro or ArtPlan and come up with a capacity. The reason why when you use ArtPlan or Synchro that you come up with a higher capacity typically is because you're reflecting real roadway conditions using real signal timing. And in the case of Synchro, you're using an optimal or optimized signal timing, a better signal timing than what you have there today. What happened was, as a result of some consultant work, the Synchro software was applied to US1, and it was shown to the Board of County Commissioners that additional capacity could be realized on US1 if the signal timing were improved and the signals were coordinated in the future. To give an example, these are the 10 roadway links or segments of US1 between 60 and 510. And under the capacity column these are capacities right out of the DOT book, right out of the DOT handbook. And next to that column is the demand, which is the existing count plus the vested traffic, the future traffic due to new development that's been vested. And then if you subtract one from the other, you can see that the available trip column on the right shows that how many trips are left on each of these links. Now, they look okay until you get down to the second and third link from the bottom, which is between 49th Street and 69th Street. You can see there that there's a negative value, and that shows that those two links would be over capacity with the generalized capacity number and the existing traffic that's on the road plus vested traffic from approved development. Translating those into percentages, you can see the two links in red there between 49th and 69th Street that would be over capacity if we applied the generalized table values. And you can see that the other green ones are also getting up there, some are at 97, 99%. If we apply Synchro, which is a signal timing, signal optimization program, you can see that the capacities on nearly all the links have been lifted up. And in fact, when you compare them to the demand, existing plus vested, now there are several hundred trips available on these links. Now, what has happened here is the consultant, when he did his Synchro analysis, he went down and looked at future signal locations along US 1. Some of those signals have already been put in now, 69th Street, 53rd Street, 41st Street. They have now been activated. And what will be happening is, as those signals are timed for progressive movement, which in the PM peak hour would be northbound, once we coordinate those signals, optimize that timing, the capacity will actually increase. And we'll be able to see better, more fluid movement up US 1 along this corridor. And here is what happens when you apply those Synchro capacities. You can see that now the capacities have come down and are all under 100%. In fact, most are in the 60 and 70% range.
You need to turn your mic on.
On second thought, leave it off.
Sorry. If you put a light in, traffic moves faster?
Well, if you put a light in and time it properly, and I don't want to make it sound like this is playing with the timing, but what you do is you actually make the preferred route US 1 and give more green time to US 1 at the penalty to the side streets. So
That's what I wondered.
you will be waiting longer at side streets, but that is what our signals sort of do today anyway. When we have detection equipment out there, they penalize
But what you're doing is forcing the capacity to build on the side streets while the main US 1 is flowing freer.
That's correct.
Because we're not over capacity on our side streets yet.
That's correct. So we're sort of spreading I don't want to say misery, but we're spreading the traffic around so that although you will have to wait longer on the side streets, once you get your green light and you get out into the mix on US 1, you'll be able to make it all the way through in a coordinated fashion.
Unless you're just going east and west and then you just...
Well, if you're going east and west, then you will not be in a coordinated system. You'll have to wait for your turn to get a green light and cross US 1.
You'll be in an area that's easement slow now, right?
Let me ask a question. When I was on the MPO, we had placed a high priority, in fact, it was number 2 priority 6 years ago, on funding to synchronize existing lights downtown, over at Boulevard and everything. Is that still in the works, or is that going by?
Yes, it is. In fact, what has happened is we've been using CMS funding, I believe it is, Bob?
Yeah, we've been using congestion management system funding. We get $500,000 a year for that, and we prioritized the closed loop system, phases 3 and 4, I think.
Right. Phases 1 and 2 have already been built, but phases 3 and 4 are what we're going to be using the CMS funding for through the MPO.
My point is, you're not going to deflect those funds from that and put it on?
No.
That's the right answer.
No, and US 1 is already evolving towards a coordinated corridor anyway, because we've been working with the DOT on these resurfacing projects, which are just now wrapping up north of Vero, to get the conduit and the fiber optic cable in the ground so that as these new signals are activated, we can coordinate them.
Great.
And that's being done right now.
Yeah.
So what the board did on July 17th, as we presented these synchro results, they accepted them and they directed staff to go ahead and apply these new synchro capacities on US 1, and they also directed staff to proceed with the synchronization of the US 1 traffic signals. And that concludes my update, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Well, I'm going to do my dance.
Well, I have one question. Do you have lights? I thought we had lights in other parts of the county that were synchronized already.
We do. We have State Road 60 is synchronized from 20th Avenue out to I-95. We have several coordinated synchronized systems in place already.
Okay, but did you increase the capacity on those because you synchronized the lights?
In some cases, we have. When the consultants look at State Road 60 and other coordinated systems, they do use our coordination timing in their analyses. So in some cases, we have bumped it up because of that.
Okay.
How quick will we see these changes or the numbers in our backup? I need to get closer to the mic. When are we going to see?
On second thought.
I agree. When are we going to see these? Will they start to reflect immediately?
The new synchro capacities will be in the backup material. Your link list will reflect that.
They're already there.
They should already be there, and any new
It
ones
was
that
used
come
tonight
across.
on one of the projects.
Okay.
But these lights are not synchronized yet, but
No, we're still, the DOT has to finish their resurfacing job, turn that fiber, so it's a question of logistics, but we will have that timing in within the next few months, yes.
Okay, and you don't anticipate a problem because of that?
With coordination, the flow will actually move
I'm
much
talking
better.
about increasing the capacities before synchronizing the lights.
No.
Okay. I mean, but I can understand your logic because there's a lag time on developments, and development is really slow right now, but
Unless we need it. then
Yes.
we'll-
if we need it,
If
it's
we need
going
it to pass the project, it's not a problem, right?
Right.
It's already there.
Okay. Anybody have any questions?
Well, I'll do my dance again. I still think it's smoke and mirrors. It's not going to magically go away because you move the target. And I'll keep that as short as it is, but I want to reiterate to people, everybody, including staff, that under Section 901-2728, the level of service definitions also include some subjective criteria, specifically as drivers having little freedom to maneuver. That is part of the criteria of a D. And nobody ever worries about that. It's D, it's always quantitative. Well, I've always done this dance, and I'll still do this dance. Part of the reasons I will still argue with you about this is because when I drive along there, I have trouble changing lanes. I have trouble maneuvering. So please remember there are some subjective issues here to be taken into consideration too, not just numbers. Okay, I'm off my box.
I have a question. At what point in time do we have to take into consideration the backup of traffic on the side roads? I mean, when you look at Main Street in Sebastian, you have a very long green light on US 1 north-south. Main Street going east-west is backed up over the railroad tracks past City Hall in the morning. At what time does this synchronization have to be looked at to accommodate the backup of traffic as growth continues on the side streets that are being held up?
Well, we look at this continuously, and my staff, the traffic counters that we employ, they do new traffic counts at all the signalized intersections once per year. And as we get that information in, as the side street traffic volumes go up, we constantly retime these signals. We retime the green splits so that the side streets don't have to wait very long. Our goal is to that once the side street gets the green light, that they all move through the signal, that there are no residual backups or queuing. Sometimes it does happen in peak periods. But we can make the signals timed with certain settings that automatically adjust those maximum greens so that can flush that traffic out. But we do monitor that constantly and try and keep the delay down for the side streets.
Then what happens is, as we change the synchronization timing, we've already approved projects based on today's synchronization timing. In 2 or 3 years, when we have to change that synchronization timing to accommodate east-west backup, now we've already got the approved projects. Now we're reducing the amount of capacity on US 1 because of changing the synchronization timing to accommodate east-west, but we're already stuck with the traffic north-south because we've increased the capacity available.
Right, and as new projects come forward, we still are having them review intersections. We're still having them analyze intersections that they're significant at. And a lot of times with intersections, you can improve signalized operations by adding a turn lane, extending a turn lane, making more room for the traffic that's approaching so that when they get their green light, they can move through pretty quickly. But it's a constant adjustment process. We're constantly looking at them and constantly making adjustments to the timing, and we feel that these capacities are valid and we can make them work now and into the future.
At what point in time in the future, like say 2 years from now, or what point in time do we say we've got to reduce the capacity numbers we're showing here that increase due to synchronization? Or what time do we reduce those capacity figures?
Well, I don't think we'd be reducing them, but we would certainly, as they get close to capacity again, we're going to have to look at 6-laning portions of US 1. That's why it's in our long-range plan. We don't intend to forget about the 6-laning. We feel that it's still going to be needed at some point. But we're saying that with the proper signal timing now, we can handle larger volumes of traffic by coordinating the signals. But we're not throwing out the 6-laning and saying that's never going to be needed.
At some point, any future projects will have to adjust if they've adjusted. The future will be paying the price at some point. And that's when you look at the 5-year plan and see what is the future brings, and that's how the adjustments would be made.
That's why I call it smoke and mirrors, too, because when that 5-year plan comes, they're going to have another formula that's going to magically solve the problem.
I think that every time we change the synchronization, we have to reduce the capacity north-south US 1 in accordance with the synchronization.
Oh, there you
That's
go.
the only
Being
way to make this
realistic
work.
again.
There's no other way to make this work.
Chris, one other point. I guess it would seem intuitive that synchronization works better at slower speeds than higher speeds.
No, that's not exactly true. We have signalized coordination patterns for 45 miles per hour, 35. We have various speeds. We try and tailor the coordination to the ambient speed of vehicles on the road. And that's another thing that we measure when we do our timings. We measure the speed in these roving platoons of cars that go through. We measure the speed that they're going at. We don't want to time signals that aren't in sync with what the traffic is actually flowing at. So we try and marry them up so that they work.
Okay, so help me understand. I guess I had gotten the idea that you were going to synchronize the lights and they were going to be at specific times. And now I'm seeing that there's going to be an adaptive algorithm in there as well?
No, what we can do is when we do our traffic counts, we count daily counts, so we know hour by hour how the volumes change, and then we do peak hour counts so that we know how many vehicles turn at intersections and so on. What we do is we adapt those timing patterns to match the traffic that's actually on the road. So in the peak hour in the morning and afternoon, the cycle length usually increases because we're trying to move more traffic up and down US 1. And then in the off-peak periods, the cycle length usually comes down because there's more demand from the side streets to get through, so we try and give them more gaps to move through. But typically we'll have 4 or 5 timing patterns on a road like US 1, and they'll all be coordination patterns.
Okay.
Well, how do we, I'm really very, very serious about when those timing patterns change to accommodate east-west traffic, and your capacity goes from 2,010 cars down to 1,890 cars or trips, that when the synchronization changes and reduces capacity, that we've got to reflect that on our traffic reports and for concurrency purposes.
Yeah, but we don't, that's the whole point of this. We don't feel that by synchronizing the lights that the capacity will come down. We think that it will remain up there to those levels that we've listed, as long as we keep the coordination patterns active and true. We don't have any reason to believe that greater amounts of traffic are going to cause the synchronization patterns to break down. We think that they will move that amount of traffic. Now, we think that once we get close to that capacity that we've listed there, that this 6-laning is going to need to be done. We just don't know when. We don't know how fast that traffic is going to grow towards that new capacity.
I think what Don is trying to say is that as the traffic increases on the east-west roads, that's going to affect your capacity, your timing and capacity on the north-south
That's true, but
travel.
we did take that into account with our timing patterns, and we feel that we can handle the amount of east-west traffic that's going to happen in the future with these timing patterns that we're proposing. And I'm not going to tell you there's not going to be more delay on the side streets. There is, because we'll be giving preference to US 1. But once that light turns green for 69th Street or 53rd Street or any of the east-west roads, there will be enough time to get that traffic through.
Okay, so in other words, this is a done deal, and nothing we say has anything to do with what's happening.
Well, the board has approved the capacities, and they're in the system now, and we are working with them as part of our concurrency management system, so we don't plan on changing them anytime soon unless someone shows us that they won't work, but we don't have any evidence that they're not going to work.
I think that's what
The inference that we were bypassed is correct.
So, Chris, if I understand you correctly, you're saying that on the 4-laning, that when you adjust the east-west, you do that with right-hand lanes, et cetera, to cause that traffic flow to increase when it gets the opportunity to get out on US 1. And then when you get to the 100% or close to the 100%, some formula there, then you start the 6 lanes to increase that US 1.
Right. That's exactly right. At some point, we know we're going to need more capacity on US 1. Right now, we think these synchronized timings will handle it with 4 lanes.
He also builds the stacking in.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Any other commissioner matters? Anybody? Okay, attorneys matters?
Can I, I'm sorry, just Chris, I'm sorry while we're on this. Is there anything we can do to make those lights, blinking lights at night? I mean, the east-west traffic, it stops all US 1 traffic when one car comes east-west onto US 1.
Well, and most of our news signals, we have a flash at night program in the county that runs from midnight to 6 a.m., and most of the signals that can be flashed at night, we do flash at night. Now, all of the new signals that we're putting in will have that flash pattern midnight to 6. We don't like to flash very large intersections because it just doesn't work very well. We tend to have to, large intersections like 60 and 58th or the new one at 512 and 995, they don't work very well with a flash pattern because you tend to have to flash red all the way around and then someone ends up having to stop. So, but we will on US 1 with the new signals be flashing them at night. It would run amber or yellow on US 1, an amber flash, and then red on the side streets, so that if you pull up late at night, you won't have to wait for that pattern to come through and change. You'll be able to just move through once traffic is clear.
Can we make that, I mean, can we make that earlier instead of waiting till midnight, like 10 o'clock?
I don't like to change the patterns because it starts to, we have done that in the past, and I've standardized on a midnight to 6 pattern for flash because when you flash some earlier or some later, the police tend to confuse them with malfunctions, and then they call us in, and then we have problems trying to fix a malfunction when there really isn't one. So it's much easier to standardize the flash patterns.
Can you change the ones on 512 to also flash?
512 east of Roseland, no, I can't change those for safety reasons.
Okay. Thanks. I'm sorry, George.
No, it's fine.
I'm sorry, I guess I missed, you have some more planning matters?
Just to give you all some updates, we don't have any items scheduled for the next Planning and Zoning Commission meeting for August 23rd, so we're canceling that meeting, so you all get another Thursday off, and that means, as far as I can tell, that this was the last Planning and Zoning Commission meeting in these chambers. Hope you all enjoyed it. A couple of other updates on action that the board has taken since your last meeting. They approved the child care facility on 58th Avenue. That was a special exception. Several rezonings, the Bahia Honda out by I-95, the Royal Professional Builders, which was on tonight with preliminary plat, a small parcel out at Red Stick, that rezoning the board approved, and the Hibiscus Children's Center project was also approved. They also approved the changes to the IL and IG zoning districts, the industrial uses there, and that ordinance went into effect July 31st. So that's on the books. Also, the board approved your request to initiate LDR amendments to the mining regulations, mining operations in ag. We anticipate going to the Professional Services Advisory Committee later this month with basically what you all saw. So it should be coming back to you all probably in September or early October as a formal LDR amendment. And we did receive an appeal of your approval of the Montessori School on 8th Street. So that'll be going to the Board of County Commissioners probably first half of September. That's the updates.
Where do we stand with we had the conversation on what the county accepts for DRI on traffic and concurrency with waterworks, whether phased in or phased, with the phases. We had the legal, we were looking at the legal ramifications of the DRI process where we had accepted and I don't remember hearing any more about that, but did that end up in, we were headed toward court at one point. Is this still on the back burner somewhere?
Well, just two things might address your question. One is, what we have agreed to do is going forward with any new DRIs and development orders to be more specific on vesting issues on that.
The language that says it's phased.
Correct. Build that right in the development order. Okay. But then the second issue is waterway, what's going on there. Of course, about half of the project is vested on the system, 733 units. There are a little over 120 units out there, so they're quite a ways away from that threshold, but there is a lawsuit, and I'm not sure if, there's been some talk of settlement, but I'm not sure how quickly that lawsuit is still out there. Pending. Yes, it's still out there.
Actually, to be honest with you, I know they hired outside counsel to handle that, and I haven't really been given much information on that.
What has happened with that Alcohope thing that was out west of town that was
going to go into the homeless rehabilitation center? That is going to the 4th DCA. The circuit court rejected the writ of prohibition. You guys understand the background to that, pretty much?
Oh, yes.
It's on its way to the 4th DCA right now, filed by the owners of the property.
Okay. I never thought it'd go that far.
Any other attorney matters?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to give you an update real quickly on the citrus greening ordinance. I know George Hamner and Doug Bornick have been very instrumental in getting that moved forward. The county commission gave direction for the county attorney's office to put together an ordinance. They wanted to make the ordinance as strong as possible, and actually wanted language that would go as far as prohibiting the sale of the plant in the county, along with placing notices on the final plat prohibiting new development from planting certain plants, as well as forcing them to remove the plants that exist on the property. In addition, there was actually going to be a third regulation that prohibited as being one of the landscape shrubbery that could be used. After research, the county attorney's office has concluded that we don't have the power. We are preempted by the state to prohibit the sale of the plant by nurseries, so we will not be bringing that regulation forward, but we will be bringing the other two regulations forward as far as putting notices on final plats, prohibiting the planting, and then also prohibiting the use as shrubs and landscaping. So I just wanted, George Hammer's been really instrumental in getting that move forward, and as well as Doug Bornick, and I just wanted to give you an update.
Anything else? I think we're adjourned.